Last-minute shakeup at 5:30 a.m., laundry situation not good. And when your focus is on helping your clients, it's easy to forget about yourself. But NASM knows trainers.
Morning ride is okay.
And staying in front of the day isn't always
Nice
as simple
ride.
as 1,
What's
2,
up?
3. So when the unexpected has you pressing pause,
What's the latest on creatine?
I'm going to get back to you on that.
let NASM1 help you press play. Visit NASM.org to sign up for a membership today.
You're listening to the NASM-CPT Podcast with Richey, winner of the Share Care Emmy Award for Social Storytelling and the official podcast of the National Academy of Sports Medicine.
Hey, y'all, and welcome to the NASM-CPT Podcast. My name is Richey, and today I have a guest that has been on the show several times. I've been on his podcast, Reciprocity. We go together. We go together like peanut butter and lettuce. We are good together. And here's what I'm saying. Like, I've been working a little bit recently on trying to build a little muscle. And I thought, what better way to make sure that I'm on the right track to building muscle than to reach out to my friend and colleague at NASM, Andre Adams. So Andre, welcome to the show.
What's going on, Rick? Thanks again for having me. I feel like it's been forever. We try to get on as frequently as possible, but this year has been a whirlwind. So thanks for having me back.
Yeah, man, it's good to have you on, and it was good to be on your show where we were trying to debunk some myths. So now we're basically going to do the same thing. Well, not basically. We're gonna talk about how we build muscle, and certainly along with that, there are myths that go along with it. There are a lot of like bro science, especially in the world of bodybuilding, and we're just going to pick your brain on some of the best ways, kind of like a bodybuilder's guide to building muscle. But with that said, I want the people who are listening to this show to know a little bit about you, especially the ones who haven't picked up that you're on the show before. They may not be familiar with you. So tell them a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, Rick. So for you guys that are not familiar or haven't seen me before, I'm Andre Adams, NASM Master Trainer and IFBB Physique Olympian, also the host of the NASM Peak Physique Podcast. And, Rick, it's been kind of a whirlwind over the last 12 years or so. This year, since you and I had a chance to catch up last, I actually came out of retirement and did a few more shows.
I saw you oiled up and veined out a little bit.
Yeah, hey, I had to get lean one more time,
Looking good.
So if I go all the way back, starting in powerlifting back in the day, and bodybuilding came out with some subcategories like men's physique. For women, it was bikini and figure. And it allowed, 40 people like myself that maybe didn't have these mass monster genes to compete successfully in bodybuilding. And, fast forward 2013, I earned my IFBB Pro card in men's physique. And then I gained 80 pounds of muscle, went all the way up to class. Competed there for about 6 or 7 years. I've competed in Olympia. And then I took about a 3 to 4 year hiatus to focus on business development. Okay. We own a 8,000 square foot gym, nutrition store, Team Adams Prep, which is international online coaching. And this year, as a matter of fact, so I turned 40 in May, right? So this year was my, let's show the youngsters, no matter how busy you are, no matter if you got kids, you got family obligations, you work hard or you're an entrepreneur, you can still get in shape when you want to. And that was really the purpose of me coming back one more time. And, I prepped and did 2 shows, actually, Tokyo. And I just came back from the country of Kazakhstan, where I finished top 10 in the world again. So feeling pretty good.
That's incredible, Andre. Congratulations, man. Congrats. That's awesome. We did a vacation not too long ago in Japan, and that place is an absolute amazing place. So I hope you had a great time when you were there. Let me pick your brain a little bit. There's some questions that come up. I get this one when it comes to putting on muscle. I hate these questions, but I'm going to ask it to you. What's more important? Which one is more important? How much is the diet, and how much of it is the workout?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. And Rick, you probably get the same questions as me, just from different clients, right? Mine being more physique focused, yours probably being more lifestyle focused. But I always get these questions like, what's the one exercise I can do? What's the one thing I can eat to lose 10 pounds, right? So in terms of building muscle though, if you guys have taken the PBC course, we always rank order them as diet is always going to be king. So nutrition, and we're talking specifically macronutrition, whole foods, right? That's going to be the biggest foundation to lay the right framework to build muscle, right? Are we consuming more calories than we're expending? Nutrient timing, nutrient partitioning, all these things are going to be very important for building muscle. Number two, in this order, is going to be training, right? Now, some people, depending on genetics, might need to train more or less, heavier, lighter, higher volumes, etc. That is very, we'll call it hyper specific to the individual, but training is always number two. And then I would put personally supplementation as number three. It's exactly that, right? It's there to complement or supplement what we're doing on top of our foundation of proper diet and exercise. Now, the fascinating part is when you put these things together, right? You put that triage together, all of a sudden 1 + 1 = 3, right? You get this accelerated result, and you can do some magical stuff when you do them all together. But diet is going to be the most impactful by itself.
Ooh, all right. Well, I want to talk about diet, but first let's get into workouts. I love this because I think you have a very interesting way of talking about workouts. I love it because you always kind of go into everything from really from science. So you'll go in and you'll talk about gas principle, and you'll talk about the SAID principle, and you go into it like that. So first, let's talk about workouts. What kind of workouts? What are we looking at here? What's the volume? What's the variety in exercise? What's tempo? Talk us through a little bit when it comes to working out. If somebody wants to put on muscle, what's the best? What it like, and you can triage them, right? Like you did with diet, exercise, and supplementation, stuff like that. Like, is it can you go into different types of routines that are good, and feel free to answer it however the spirit moves you.
Yeah, it could be a complex answer. I'm going to sort of delineate the two, right? If we think about competitive physique and bodybuilding athletes that have to meet very specific criteria for a division. So let's take the men's physique division, for instance, right? They can only get so big, and they have to have these proportions and this X frame and this body weight. So theirs is going to be a little different than, let's say, a transformation or a lifestyle client who's just looking to, in general, build muscle or improve their body comp, right?
Okay.
So let's focus on, it'll kind of be a hybrid approach of just, in general, how do we build muscle? I like to start by leveraging our OPT model, right? So we've kind of adapted that now with PBC specific to a physique outcome. But for the most part, you can still cycle through those lower phases too. And we're talking about stabilization, strength, endurance. But primarily, we're going to be doing the bulk of our work, let's say 90% plus, in that hypertrophy and muscular development phase. Now, even within those phases, to your point, Rick, as we start to increase work capacity, whether you're a novice lifter or you're experienced, and you've been training for several years, over time, we can stay within that hypertrophy phase for longer by leveraging things like progressive overloading, right? Where we're over time increasing the intensity, the duration of an exercise, the set volume, could be the reps, could be the, changes in tempo or adding more weight. So there's a lot that we can do even within that hypertrophy phase to avoid plateau and continue to build muscle. And then, over time, I would say good rule of thumb is every 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes as many as 8 weeks, if you're getting good results, start to shift into different training splits. Now, again, if we're just looking at the average person that's in general trying to build muscle all over the body, I would just look at exercise selection. So maybe your split stays the same. Maybe you're in a 4 or a 5 day split. Let's take a 4 day split, right? Kind of intermediate lifter. And they're doing 2 upper body, 2 lower body days, right? We could completely change the exercise selection, or we could emphasize a little bit more lats and shoulders or chest on their upper body days, maybe more arms if that's their goal. Same thing on the lower body days. We can emphasize the glutes, the hamstrings, the quads, the calves. So I look at variety and definitely changing the exercise selection or the exercise modalities every 4 to 6 weeks, progressively overloading every couple of weeks. And that's really going to build a good foundation for muscle gain. You know, there's a lot more we could go into there and get super specific, but I think that at least lays the framework to have a successful, you know, what I would call improvement phase or muscle gain phase.
Yeah, I'd like to also have you just talk about this for a moment, because I know when I was young, and there was always like, you're supposed to do X amount of lifts for, let's say, chest day, right? So you're going to do a flat bench, and then you're going to do incline, and then you're going to do decline, and then you're going to do flies, and then only once you've gone through like 36 sets of lifting, only then have you done enough. Like, what is enough? And let's just say intermediate lifter, right? So it's not a new person, because that's gonna throw us off completely. But for like an intermediate lifter, somebody that's a personal trainer, even, that's listening to this and that's going, all right, let's see what Coach Adams has to say about this.
Yeah, and this is interesting because you'll hear a lot of even like people at the top of bodybuilding sport. If we look at the difference between Ronnie Coleman or Arnold Schwarzenegger's training, or Dorian Yates, right? Dorian Yates was of the mindset that with 1 or 2 sets, and we're talking huge, high volume, start heavy as heck, and then come down and, you know, drop set all the way down to the point where you can't lift the bar. That's a set, right? So Dorian's philosophy was you could get by with 1 to 2 working sets for a muscle group in a workout. Totally different than if you look at the way Ronnie trained, or Arnold was more of what you just described, right? 30 to 40 high volume sets to fully exhaust the muscle. And then I would say Lee Haney he's the opposite side of the spectrum, 8-time Mr. Olympia. And, you know, Lee's philosophy was stimulate, don't annihilate, right? So when we look at those mechanisms of hypertrophy and we're looking at the exercise induced muscle damage, Lee was of the mindset, let's focus on things like metabolic stress, blood flow, pump work, tension, time under tension, but maybe not completely destroying the muscle to the point where it's counterproductive. Now, for me, I like to say intermediate lifter, where I'm going to probably start them. First thing I look at is their experience and work capacity. Again, are they truly novice? Are they intermediate? So we'll say intermediate. They've been lifting maybe 1 to 2 years, or, you know, kind of learning on their own. Maybe they've had a trainer at one time. Good starting point, and this will also vary by body type, which I'll get into. Could be, 18 to 22 sets, working sets. Maybe you got 1 or 2 light warm-up feeder sets for each exercise. But I like to target around, 18 to 22 working sets for a muscle group in that particular exercise. Now, where things can get a little bit interesting is if you're doing multiple muscle groups on that day, right? So bodybuilding is a little bit more isolated. We might be trying to, in our split, isolate just the chest muscles. Obviously, you got some ancillary work there on, shoulders and triceps. Right. But, you might say, I'm going to do a push day today. I'm doing chest, shoulders, and triceps. So when I say 18 to 22 sets, now you got to think about how am I going to distribute that among these groups? And maybe I need 24, 26 sets to get all 3 of those muscle groups in there. But there's been some studies that I've read over the last year that are starting to change the way people think about how much is enough. And it's about that adaptation. So very similar to what you mentioned earlier with like SAID principle, but it's the body basically building up this tolerance and this work capacity and creating an adaptation to, in this study, it was as high as 52 working sets per week per muscle group is what they observed through well-trained athletes. So, it can vary by the individual. The last thing I'll leave you with on that question is really the, your natural genetic body type. If we look at ectomorph, mesomorph, endomorph, and ectomorph being that hard gainer, mesomorph being, very easy, kind of the ideal genetics for bodybuilding, easy to gain muscle and maintain a healthy body comp. And then endomorph, being that more android body type, bigger joints, things like that. For me, I do factor that into the way I approach an initial plan. Ectomorphs are going to be a little bit lower volume, probably more in that 16 to 20 rep range, but heavier weights, lower volumes, more compound movements. to build that initial foundation of muscle, definitely more aggressive with their nutrition and their carbohydrates. Versus, let's take the opposite end of the spectrum with the endomorph, higher volumes because we're worried about maintaining body comp. They're going to build, but they're building fat and muscle, right? So for them, I might start them at 24 to 28 sets per muscle group, a little bit lighter weights, less compounds, more isolated movements.
Okay, gotcha. Now, you've mentioned a few times PBC. I know what that means. Can you share with our audience what that means?
So if you guys don't know what PBC means, you got to go to NASM.org and go to specializations, look up the Physique and Bodybuilding Coach course. And it's a course that I was fortunate enough to participate in some of the development work as an SME, and so many other brilliant minds. There's 23 other SMEs that were involved. And, PBC, Physique and Bodybuilding Coach, really covers everything you need to know about transformation clients and lays that foundation for, coaching physique and bodybuilding clients as well. So, definitely cover some excellent nutrition topics, supplementation, training strategies, a lot of the stuff we're talking about here, energy expenditure, and then all the way down into the training templates. So highly recommend it. If you work with a lot of transformation clients, you got to check it out.
Excellent. Well, while we're on that, I'm going to go ahead and plug a commercial here. So I'm going to go with the live read here. This episode of the NASM-CPT Podcast is brought to you by NASM One, the membership for trainers and coaches. Members enjoy unlimited access to hundreds of career resources. Get the Edge app to schedule and program clients. Enjoy half off all certifications and specializations. Access to free CEUs and more. All of this for just $35 a month. Go to nasm.org/membership to learn more about NASM One. All right, Dre, I'm going to ask you about diet now. So I like what we talked about with the workouts, but let's get into talking about diet and supplementation. First thing I need to talk about is, ever since I've been in the gym, there have been dudes with weight belts and gallons of water that walk around the gym. I'm not going to ask you about the weight belts, but I have to turn my attention to the gallon of water that these monsters are walking around with. Is that something that in order to be a bodybuilder, you have to have a jug with you? Talk to us about the importance of water here.
Hey, you could use the jug to get some curls, and a gallon's 8.3 pounds. So
anytime you just try to get a little extra lift.
That's right. No, the gallon, here's the thing is, we focus on really two things. One is the behavioral goals, right? And a lot of people struggle to get proper hydration in. And when we say hydration, we're talking H2O, water plus electrolytes. And it's really difficult if you're not monitoring it, even for me. If I'm running around and I have a lot of clients that day, running between my office and then the gym floor, what ends up happening if I'm drinking just bottles of water, and let's say I need 12 bottles of water that day, after 5 or 6, I kind of lose count. I'm like, wait, did I have 7 or did I have 5? So, the gallon is something that's easy to see. It gives you some visual feedback. It's 3 p.m. and you still got a full gallon on your desk. You're like, whoa, I'm behind in my water. I got to catch this up.
Gotcha.
So that's the main reason. It's a behavioral goal. And then why do we need the hydration in the first place? Well, everyone on this planet needs hydration, but for athletes, even more important, right? We've got a lot of supplements, a lot of hard dieting, a lot of stress and strain on our liver, kidneys. So we're also looking at dilution being that solution. We're trying to keep the system flushed out and stay well hydrated. And then, as definitely helping with just, muscle performance, right? Trying to make sure that we keep the muscles hydrated so we get good performance out of them as well.
Excellent. That's such a great answer, and I appreciate that. Let's get into the importance. Let's start off with probably the most important one, protein. Talk to us about protein. What are we looking at, making sure that we get in? Are we doing, if we're doing enough protein supplementation, do we also need to supplement with BCAAs or other amino acids? Talk to me.
So it's actually a great question. We'll start with proper protein intake. If you look at any of the textbooks, it's going to be a much lower amount than you would see in bodybuilding, for instance. And there's several reasons for that, which I'll kind of high level talk about. But, a lot of the studies from back in the day would show 0.82 gram per kilogram body weight, which is good for just maintenance, weight loss, or lifestyle clients to get adequate protein. And basically what they're saying there is that they're not saying that that's the limit of how much protein you should eat, but that there's the diminishing returns, right? So anything above that, there weren't noticeable increases in lean body mass. Now, for bodybuilders though, right? When we're talking, there's a difference between a cheerleading athlete and a bodybuilding athlete, right? They're both athletes. But with bodybuilding, when we're breaking down amino acids specifically, we got to replenish those. So we need to increase our total amount of protein, our pCals. And, good rule of thumb, and again, this varies wildly because you don't want to overdo the protein where it's too much stress and the kidneys can't keep up, right? And you get BUN and creatinine and other issues going on in the kidney where it can't keep up with this. But in general, we like to say around nothing under 1 gram, per pound of body weight. But I like to go honestly as high as 1.5. And there's instances where you can go as high as 2 or 2.5. It kind of depends on the individual, how much muscle mass they carry, how intensely and how many, what's the volume and frequency of their workouts. And then another thing that a lot of people just maybe don't understand is you've got our, lifestyle clients and our natural athletes. And then you've got athletes that are on exogenous hormones. And when I say that, we're not talking TRT, which is bringing you to homeostasis, right? We're talking about, athletes that choose to use exogenous hormones and they're in a super physiological state of testosterone or other compounds. When that happens, their ability for muscle protein synthesis skyrockets, right? So you have a much higher ability to metabolize proteins and use them without storing them as energy and, for us, fat, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind, that if you are working with natural athletes and clients, there's going to be a big difference in their muscle protein synthesis and their muscle nitrogen abilities compared to athletes that maybe are on, additional supplementation and hormones.
Let me run this by you then, because we have different, we have people that have different body fat, right? And so let's say, I weigh 170 right now, but I'm 15% body fat. If I was 170 and 6% body fat, and I'm still the same weight, but my body composition's different. Do you have different protein protocols for somebody that says, okay, well, I'm 170 pounds, so going my weight again, 170 pounds, but 30% body fat? Does it change based on body fat, what you're looking at when you're giving your protein, 2 grams per pound of body fat, per pound of body weight?
That's actually an excellent question, Rick. And I would approach that a couple different ways, right? The first thing you're thinking about is this client losing, right? They're trying to burn fat and recomp, or are they gaining and they need to be at a caloric surplus? So that is going to dictate sort of that macronutrient partitioning and that split. Okay. I don't think I would necessarily have a massive difference in their amount of protein calories, but if it's someone who's struggling to lose weight in the first place, or they have insulin resistance and they're highly sensitive to storing fat from carbs, for instance, I might have a higher percentage of protein for that individual. Now, for your question, though, it raises an excellent point, right? If you carry more lean body mass, right, so we're talking about body composition now, does it require necessarily more amino acids to support it? And I think logically, I would say yes. Okay. It would make sense that they could metabolize a higher amount of protein, and in theory, their muscle protein synthesis should be higher. There's just more lean body mass. So that's a good point. One tool that I use that would be very helpful in that is, because if you and I calculate it by hand, we're going to come up with a number for their BMR and their total daily energy expenditure, right? Yeah. But if we put them on an in-body scan or a DEXA scan, for instance, now it's direct measurement. We're not estimating, and now we can get the BMR that's very accurate. It's based on their lean body mass, and then we can then add on top of that their daily energy expenditure. That would be a much more accurate way to calculate how much total macro, total calories, and then protein calories they need. right? Because then we're not guessing, are they 7%, are they 15% body fat?
Right. Yeah, true.
Yeah. So the BMR is directly proportional to how much skeletal muscle mass that individual carries. That would be the correct answer for me. And then earlier you did mention BCAAs also. I think that can be an excellent tool, regardless of their body comp. And then taking it one step further for bodybuilding, we actually use less frequently BCAAs today, and we use more frequently essential amino acids, which are EAAs. And, they come in the exact profile and proportions, or the ratios of your muscle tissue. So it's more common in bodybuilding actually to use EAAs intra-workout or post-workout to start that recovery process.
Oh, ooh, okay. All right, we're going to talk about recovery in a moment. So we're going to let's get a little more on the supplements. So we talked about water, we talked about protein. There are two more that I want to make sure we hit on. One is caffeine, and the other is creatine. So if you could speak to those in whichever order you'd like to hit first.
Yeah, let's start with caffeine. So caffeine is very common, right? You're going to see that in a lot of pre-workouts. Obviously, some high stim pre-workouts might be a little over the top for some people, but there are some benefits for sure, just from a training standpoint, that I think caffeine can bring to the table. It's also a natural diuretic, right? So there's times in bodybuilding where we might implement caffeine as well, just for the diuretic properties. But for our female clients especially, so I work with today about 80 to 90% females for Team Adams Prep. And one very common thing from the amount of physiological stress or physical stress we're putting on the body is, over time, especially as girls get leaner and leaner, throughout the course of a contest prep, dialing down into that stage conditioning, very common to have hypothalamic amenorrhea, right? Where the menstrual period stops for 3 or more months. And one of the big contributors for that, as well as just poor sleep, is too much caffeine. So for a lot of our female clients, I'll actually recommend limiting their total caffeine intake to no more than 300 to 400 milligrams total per day. And, you've got to be careful because there's caffeine in so many different products that we take, from energy drinks to pre-workouts to coffee, whatever it might be. And a lot of people, they hate when I tell them that, right? Because that's what they use. That's what they rely on to get through the day. But I promise you, if you're having issues with sleep, you're having some of those hypothalamic amenorrhea issues, limiting that caffeine to 300 to 400 mg per day or less over a period of time is going to do you some favors. So just keep that in mind, everything within moderation. And then as far as creatine, this is a good question. It's always a highly debated question. Who should take creatine? I actually did an interview for Insider Media earlier this year on this question.
Oh, cool.
And, it's one of those things where, in theory, creatine should help everyone from a muscle performance standpoint, right? ATP production, so energy production, right? Adenosine triphosphate, big fancy word. Creatine definitely can help with volumization, right? Of holding more water in the muscle, increasing your strength endurance when you're doing those, that fifth or sixth set of heavy leg day and you're trying to squeeze out a few more reps, right? The creatine can definitely be an asset. Now, one condition we'll say that I would caution people is if you've got maybe like liver or kidney dysfunction. If you frequently do your blood work and your BUN, so BUN and creatinine, or your CK values are elevated, those are byproducts, right? Those are metabolites that are left over from things like creatine and amino acids that break down in the bloodstream. So in those conditions, if you're prone to that or you're highly sensitive to elevated creatinine levels in the bloodstream, I would caution using additional creatine supplementation. Maybe just stick with whole food sources like red meats, which certainly contain amounts of creatine anyways. But overall, it is one of my favorite things to implement. Some people tend to get a little GI disruption, right, where they're maybe holding water or gives them an upset stomach. But overall, I think the reward, we'll say the juice is worth the squeeze, right? The reward is worth a small amount of side effects or risks. So creatine's one of my top 3.
Excellent. All right. What are your top 3? What's your?
Ooh, it depends on the individual, but okay. I know people hate that answer, but let's delineate guys and girls. That'll help a little bit, right? So top 3 for gaining muscle. Ooh, I always got to start with foundation though. You got to start with the multivitamin. If you don't have those base nutrients and minerals in the body, to get those chemical reactions and nutrient uptake, none of it really matters. So you got to start with a good multivitamin. But when we're talking specific to performance supplements, right? You guys see me, I've been a first form athlete, for instance, right? That would be a great collection of performance supplements. Creatine is definitely top 3. EAAs we talked about. Are they essential? Well, yes and no, right? If you're getting enough amino acids from your whole food sources, maybe you don't need them, but I like to add them in intra-workout no matter what, especially when you're training hard. And number 3, gosh, that's a hard one. That is a hard one because there's so many good supplements out there for muscle building. On the spot.
By the way, these are supplements outside of protein supplementation, because I feel like protein supplementation is a gimme.
Okay, so that's a good point, right? And for you guys, if you are supplement with protein, post-workout protein, your isolate's going to be one of your most important tools. But let's do one more outside of that. Specific to muscle building, I got to go with, maybe beta-alanine. I like, right? It's going to help, more of an anti-fatigue and help you train at your peak performance for longer, right? Without having that lactic acid buildup. And that's definitely one of my staples too. But, for most of us, we're taking pre-workout that is a compound, right? So you've got arginine for blood flow. You got agmatine for vasodilation. You've got citrulline for pump. You've got so many other things that are included in a well-rounded pre-workout. So for me personally, my third one would be like Project One from First Form, because it's a full spectrum pre-workout and you get, betaine for muscle hydration. There's calcium in there for muscle contractions, right? Sodium in there for additional pump and nutrient uptake. So for me, it's kind of got to be a well-rounded blend, but when you isolate them out, make sure it's also got some creatine and some EAAs in there.
All right, cool. I like that. Let's dig a little bit more into the last of kind of my segments, which is the workout diet supplementation. And then the last one here that I want to talk to you about, and then I'm going to let you go. Have your time back. Can we talk about rest and recovery for a minute?
Yeah, so rest and recovery. Rick, if you think back to an episode you and I did actually, probably 2 years ago now with Dr. Sonny Andrews.
Yeah, of course. That was a great one.
We did the glute development episode.
That's
and
right.
We talked about a concept called the SRA curve, right? So stimulus, recovery, and adaptation, and how we are, as we're training, we're putting the stimulus on the muscle enough to the point where we're breaking down tissue and, we're catabolic for that period of time. But when that recovery process starts, we get that, that super, what do we want to call it? The words I'm looking for here. We get the super compensation, right?
Super compensation. Oh yeah, of course.
So if we start to track it, right, over time, every time we rebuild the muscle back, we're at or above homeostasis levels. And then over time, we start to build muscle, right? So that SRA curve is very important when we think about what type of training, how hard the training, and how long that individual needs between training sessions to recover. My rule of thumb, and a lot of this you can just play by feel, is if your muscles don't feel at least 90% recovered, you shouldn't train that muscle group yet. You might want to wait another day, right? Okay. It could be counterproductive. So that's my basic rule of thumb is, the feedback loop is if you feel like you're just running your body into the ground, I'm not at least 90% recovered, I'm probably going to avoid training that. But you can get strategic with your training split to allow that recovery between workouts. So Monday might be a really hard, quad and glute day. Tuesday could be lats, Wednesday could be shoulders and chest or arms, so that by Thursday, it's either a rest day or you can come back to legs, right? Because now the legs should be recovered. You've had adequate time. Good rule of thumb, though, never less than 24 hours. Honestly, it's preferable to do 48 to 72 hours between training sessions. And sometimes you might have such a good and effective session, you're sore for half a week.
Yeah, right. True.
There's instances where if you execute properly, you might only need to train each muscle group once really hard per week, but definitely minimum 24 hours. And then during that recovery process, make sure you're hitting those big 3. You're getting the proper nutrition, most importantly, pre and post workout. And then we talked about intra-workout EAAs for recovery. You want a fast digesting carbon protein post-workout, spike your glucose and insulin. It's going to signal the muscle receptors, shuttle those amino acids in, right? That's going to improve your recovery so much better. If you're doing the creatine, for instance, you could also stack in 10 grams, 5 to 10 grams of L-glutamine, and then vitamin D plus HMB to speed up that recovery process even faster. And that's honestly, Rick, you and I need to talk about vitamin D and HMB. All right, so this is going to be a quick pro tip for you guys. Write this down. If you and look up the medical studies on this, there's been a lot of work recently on it. But if you take our basic components, vitamin D, take some HMB, and then I like to use either sea salt or pink Himalayan sea salt. Let's say my pre-workout meal is about 60 minutes before I lift. Maybe it's oats, maybe it's cream of rice, and then we've got a protein, right? Whether it's chicken or a shake. But put about a 1/4 teaspoon of the sea salt, take your vitamin D and HMB supplement, and you are going to increase your muscle protein synthesis significantly. So I like to do actually pre and post workout, but that's a quick, easy tip. One way to build muscle a little bit faster. So I want you to try that, Rick. And the next time you and I chat, I want to know about your results.
All right. It's good. I've got my vitamin D supplements right over there in the fridge that I take daily. So I'm gonna get the HMB added to it. I'm gonna make my order. Hey, you know any place I could get some supplements? You know, place?
Yeah, definitely.
Go ahead then.
So exactly. So you know we got you covered, and there's some really good ones out there too. You know, for my athletes. Obviously, we start with First Form for all of our performance supplements, but I also work through Fullscript too. So I'm a nutritionist and practitioner through Fullscript. So when we have like specialty supplements like that, I'll usually just prescribe them a link, and they're able to do their shopping there and take advantage of the Team Adams discounts. But and a lot of the ones like that, like vitamin D with HMB, for instance, you can get them compounded into one vitamin instead of having to have 2 supplements. So there's some really good options out there, but anytime you need help with that, you know who to call. I'll take care of it.
Bro, you're my man. Dude, thank you so much for spending some time with us and talking us through some of these things, from muscle and workout to diet to rest and recovery. With that said, why don't you go ahead and plug your business, give us your Insta handles, all that stuff, so people can find you.
Absolutely. So guys, you can find me online. Let's start with Instagram. It's going to be at @AndreAdams_official. And then I've got a couple websites actually. So for you guys that are interested in contest prep specifically, you're looking to step on stage, that's going to be AndreAdamsOfficial.com. You can click the contest prep application there, and I'll review it and set up a consult. For all of you lifestyle clients that are looking for online coaching, transformations, weight management, that's going to be teamadamsprep.com. And definitely reach out with any follow-up questions you have for Rick or myself. We're always here to help you guys.
Without a doubt. All right, Andre, thank you so much for being here, man. I greatly appreciate it. And for you, thank you so much for listening. If you want to reach out to me, you can hit me up on Instagram at dr.rickrichey or email me, rick.richey@nasm.org. Thanks for listening. Y'all keep inspiring people to fitness. This has been the NASM-CPT Podcast.